So today I'm going to try to do something a little different. This is a system that was already sent to me in the past to do a repair on. And when I went through the whole process, tested the system out and everything, and sent it back, when the customer received the system back, they said they had issues with the system reading disk. Now, it seems to be not too uncommon for especially Xbox One original systems to have optical disk drive issues as a result of the shipping process. So during shipping, maybe the systems are getting knocked around and some of the gears for the drive itself, particularly with loading disks, get knocked out of place. So we'll see if that's the case here. It could be something else as well, but I do try to make it a regular part of my process where I test the optical disk drive before I send systems back, and that was the case in this system as well. They sent the system back to me, and they sent the system along with this disk. And let me put the disk in so you guys can hear what's actually going on with the system. So I have this thing powered up right now, and as you can see, that's the system there. It's not online because the system asked to do an update, and I told it not to do it because I wanted to get to actually repairing this before we do the update itself. Anyways, without further ado, here's what happens when you put in a disk. Okay, so that's pretty unique. It does sound like the disk itself is spinning up. However, it's having difficulty actually reading the disk. It's a good sign that the drive at least accepts the disk. But as far as what the actual issue is here, I'm not 100% sure. Sometimes it's an issue with the gears getting knocked out of place, which could be what's going on here, but this might be a unique situation. Either way, though, let's get the system apart and we'll check it out. At this point, I'll link you to a video about how to tear down an original Xbox One to get to the point where you can take the optical disk drive out, but also where you can get to the hard drive for either repair or swapping that as well. Okay, so let's skip ahead to the system being apart. Okay, now we have our Xbox One system completely apart, and we've gotten down to our optical drive. I would have hopefully already linked you to that video where we are taking the system down to this particular component. But what we want to do is get this outer case off so we can look at the innards of our optical disk drive. Now this uses a standard Phillips head screwdriver, I'm using a small bit here. It's referred to Phillips head 1 or 0.1. And there are 4 screws to remove here. And for these screws here at the top, we're going to pull this back here a little bit. Okay, so with those screws out, we can take this bottom case off. And we can see the Blu-ray main board. We'll put this piece aside here. Now the next thing to do is to check the gears. It's not uncommon for the gears to be out of whack, and you wouldn't see that from the bottom of the board here. You would see it from the other side. But just looking at this side of the board, everything looks okay. The ribbon cable seems to be in good shape here. Anyways, so what we want to do is get this top piece off here. Okay, now to do that, we have these clips here on the back side. And what we want to do is pull them up a little bit and then pull back on the metal case, or basically pull it forward, because these are holding these 2 pieces together right now. So we will start by separating those out. It might be a good idea to use either a pry tool to pry up on these and then lift away. There we go. You just want to get the clip. We could also use our butter knife to do this as well if you have that on you. There we go. Just be careful not to snap any of those pieces off. But you can see at this point we already have all that started. And we're going to go to the underside of the board here. And what we want to do is just pull this straight back. So the only thing to watch out for when we're taking this piece off is these guys here at the front. There was a screw holding these together that we removed, but then there's also a little plastic little plastic piece holding that in, and we just want to lift it over everything here and out. And now it does look like this might have been taken apart before by someone else. There's a couple little pins that should be in both spots here. They appear to be broken in here. Anyways, let's flip this over and see if we can see anything obviously wrong with anything. Now, typically, where I see problems with this drive are with these gear bits here or here. This actually looks to be okay. They look to be about in the right position. So this area of the drive is important to look at. And I'll show you an image of a perfectly functioning drive in how it's laid out. And then this area here also is important to make sure these teeth are lining up okay. This thing slides back and forth like so. Sometimes this can get out of whack. So I will compare this with a working drive to see if this looks okay. And I won't touch anything until I know what needs repairing, or if the gears themselves are actually the cause of the problem that we're seeing here. Okay, so there doesn't appear to be anything obviously wrong with the gears here. So I think what we're going to do is hook everything back up again and leave our drive open like this so we can see it accepting the disk and what might be going on there. Actually, with just touching this on the back, I'm thinking the problem is actually the laser itself. It seems to be a bit free moving here. The best way to figure out what we have going on here with this is to compare it with another drive. Oof. Yeah, it looks like there's a worm motor here that turns and makes this laser go up and down. That seems to be messed up here, from what I can tell. All right, so I'm going to get a working drive and see how this differs from the working drive. Okay, now this is a proper working drive that I took apart just to see how this worked. And as I said, this one didn't feel right, and it's not. So as it turns out, and I'll try to take a picture of this so you guys can see it up close, but there is this little white piece that's held on with a Phillips head screw, and there is a tiny spring that pushes these plastic teeth against the worm motor, so that as it spins, it can move the Blu-ray laser up and down. And what we're going to try to do is take this screw out, take this piece off, and transfer it to our non-working drive and see if that fixes the problem. Trying to make some room here. Okay, so first we're going to remove this piece from our non-working drive. So it looks like we have one small Phillips head there. I need a smaller Phillips bit. You definitely want to try to get a set as small as possible. And I'll have some links in the description of the screwdriver sets that I'm using in this video. But let's remove this guy right here. I don't know if this screw will be enough. Oh, yep, okay. So this is our piece with the missing spring. And you can see the plastic is broken here, which is pretty interesting. So I'm not sure you could buy this individual part, But you can certainly buy an entire replacement Blu-ray drive for your Xbox One. You can't just swap the entire drive. This board that we are having an issue with is linked to this guy here. So if we were to switch to this drive completely, we'd need to take this board out and put it into here. And that would require desoldering 2 points here and disconnecting all these guys here. However, in this case, to get at the part that we need, we only need to take out one screw. So if you could just get a hold of this part, great. And I'll link it if I can find a way to get a part of just that part. I'll link it in the description. Otherwise, you might need to get a whole drive. Okay, so I took a couple minutes to check out to see if I could find the replacement part on eBay, and sure enough, EP Game Supply has the part that we're looking for actually on sale. The price seems a little bit steep to me at $7, but it's one of those parts that no one's probably making a real replacement for, and it's certainly cheaper than buying an entirely new Blu-ray drive. So I'll put a link to this in the description of this video. The nice thing about having an extra drive laying around is you could use it for other parts in the future if you ever have a problem again in the future. Anyway, so we'll take that screw out of our good drive here. We'll lift this up. And it seems to come right out. Okay, so we'll put our donor drive aside here. And we'll drop this in. Okay, and that's pretty nice because it all lines up pretty nicely. And not to mention that the screw hole itself lines up. And there we go. So will that be enough to actually fix the drive? Well, let's find out. Okay, so without putting this entire drive back together, we want to put this together enough to see if we can actually get it to accept and read a disk. So this here is the underside of our drive. We're going to leave the top part of the case off for now. And put our bottom part on first. We're doing this mostly because that's where the screws are. But also, when we put the drive back in, we can ensure that it won't make contact, or any of the underneath parts will make contact with something they shouldn't on the board underneath. If you are not comfortable with that, certainly feel free to put the drive back together completely. In the past, on these repairs that I've done of these drives, as I said before, it was only adjusting the gears, so I didn't actually need any parts. But I do try to keep parts for everything available. And this is the first time I've had to fix that particular part. Okay, so normally the top part has this little clip which holds the drive itself in place against this clip here, which now we don't have. So we'll put this in place first, and then lay our drive here like this. This is by no means perfect, but should allow us best access to see if our drive is working properly. We're going to put our hard drive back in. Now, for the sake of this video, we're going to go a couple steps further here. We're going to take our speaker off. So this has a little clip here, and we're going to take this off. The reason being is I want to leave this top case off so we can actually see our drive in action. So we're going to plug in the speaker here. This is just so that we can hear when we hit the power button and we hit the eject button, which would be useful. Now, in terms of getting this connected, in my other video I told you not to remove these 3 screws, but in this case we're going to want to actually remove them. These are T8 screws, and there are 3. And I'll show you what that does in a second. Okay, now that gets our tray out that we can connect our Wi-Fi and Blu-ray board to. But next we need to remove the cable here for the Wi-Fi Blu-ray board. And underneath here there are some clips that we want to lift up ever so slightly. Just do one of them. Don't need to do both. And then you pull out the one that we lifted. And then the other one comes right out. And then you can just leave it like that for when you put it back in. It should be enough to hold it in place. And so now we have everything disconnected from our top piece here. So normally this sits like this. So we take our board here and just attach it like so. And then we're going to plug this into our main board. And then if we were careful, that's still connected. And we want to connect this to our front board here. This allows us to still be able to use our wireless controllers at a certain distance. And last but not least, we're going to add our buttons back to the front. So again, this is how you can get or test your system while still having a lot of access to it. The other model systems, the S and the X, have different methods for doing this, but for the time being, this should be good enough for this here. Okay, so now we just need to plug everything in. And we'll connect everything up. All right, so we're going to start this up. And there may be more that we need to do with this, but we'll check that out in a second. I just wanted you to see this booting up. We got our controller here. Now I think without having an update, we should be able to see the disk loading either way. We might have to update the system before we can actually make sure our disk is working okay. But one of the main ways we'll know if we fixed it is if it stops making those strange noises. The other would be that it actually starts to do an install of Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Okay, didn't try to connect to Xbox Live. I do have it plugged in here, but that's okay. We won't worry about that. Let's see if our disk is working. I'm going to stretch this out. I just want you guys to be able to see this as much as possible. Let's give this a try. And already that sounds a lot better. Installation started, so let's move this out of the way here. To the queue here. And you can see, there we go, right away we're installing from disk. And just to show you that there's no trickery here, let's eject. Now I know this isn't overly useful, but the point here was to show you how you can basically troubleshoot your drive. I know there could be a lot of things wrong with your drive, but there are several times I've been able to fix these without really it costing anything at all. This little part is what kept us from using our Blu-ray drive, playing Blu-ray games or watching Blu-ray movies. Okay, so let's throw the disc back in. Okay, there you go. You can see the disk is installing again. So I'd consider this system repaired at this point. So the next step will show you putting this drive back together. Okay, so let's take our disk out and we'll start the process of getting all this back together again. Okay, so let's get all this back to a reasonable state. So first thing we're going to do is unplug our power here so that we don't accidentally turn it on when we start trying to get everything pieced back together. So first we're going to take our front board off again, as I showed you in the other video how to actually do. You should be pretty familiar with that by now. And we'll put this out of the way. And we'll take off our Wi-Fi Blu-ray board. And we will take out our speaker. Okay, so at this point we got to get our Blu-ray drive case back together so we can unplug this. And putting this back together is fairly straightforward. Again, we want to take these clips off the back, and what we're going to want to do is get our upper case back on. Now before we do that though, we're going to need to remove our screws again, because these screws actually go through this top case as well to hold everything together. Be careful when holding this. You don't mess up anything on the bottom. Okay, with that panel back off, we want to, okay, so this is the top of our drive. So starting from the side where the cables are connected, we want to put it underneath these two guys here and slide this all the way down. Careful not to catch anything on the way. Should go relatively smooth. Okay, so again, just make sure this plastic part and these this cable pieces here and this here slide underneath. So sometimes you get a little caught up. Yeah, sometimes we get caught up on that clip here. You want to be really careful. Do not force anything in this case, because you could just as easily create new problems. So when you get everything back together again, now something else isn't working. But once you got it mostly back together, we want to fix our clips here at the top again. I want these to all snap in place, like so. Seems to be okay. Underneath, our screw holes are lining up good, and our clips seem to be all in the right place. Excellent. And we can see our fixed clip there. Still seems to be okay. All right, so we'll put our bottom tray piece back on and screw it down. And put our 4 screws back. Okay, so at this point we have all of our screws back in, and we're going to want to just rest this in the tray. Easily clips on. We want to make sure this tab is in the right place, but there's no screws, as I said before, that's holding this in place. We just want to line this up here, the proper holes. And there should be 2 pads on either side of this drive which would line up with the casing, so should fit pretty snug. That's how we know in the right place. We're in the right place. And we'll replug these connectors here. Okay, now the other main thing before we switch back to our putting everything back together video is to get the proper pieces onto our top case. Now you can see there's a nice picture there of where the speaker goes, and the holes line up pretty good with the clips, and that clips in like that, and then we'll plug this into our front board. But prior to doing that, I'm going to take our Wi-Fi / Bluetooth board and lift that out. Now this guy needs to be reattached to our metal board here. And again, these are T8 screws, and there should be 3 of them. And they're all right here. Okay, so we'll get all those started. There we go. And there we go. Okay, so now we'll temporarily attach this here. And then we just want to get our clips back in. As I said before, just put one in at a time. And we won't bother to bend anything back because these should fit okay and hold in well enough. Okay. There we go. So now we'll be able to connect this in and put this all back together again. So now I'll have you refer back to my teardown video, the second half of that, which is actually putting everything back together again. We now have our system back together after repairing our optical disk drive or replacing that small part on our optical disk drive. But what we have to do now is rehook this up, and we are going to test that our system is still capable of reading disks. What we'll also do is, if it asks us to update, we'll update this time, because we not only want to install the game, but we want to make sure it actually runs. Okay, so let's get this powered on, and we'll shrink this down. Okay, so you can see we're back here again. Now let's throw our disk in, make sure our drive still is able to read a disk. And looks like we're back to installing, which is great. I probably won't bother to do the update. Let's just show you that our drive is still installing. I won't waste your time with showing you the game working. The main purpose of this video is to show you that we could get the Blu-ray drive working again. Give this a second to continue installing. Okay, as you can see, it's installing from the disk again. Okay, so that was an example on how you can get into your Blu-ray drive or your optical disc drive and fix potential problems. So this one was just a tiny part that needed fixing, but it's something that we need to replace. Other times, it's actually something you can fix without needing any parts at all. But hopefully this will help you out with at least on figuring out how you can get your system apart and get your optical disc drive apart, and where you might be able to look to find the cause of the issue that you're having. Alright, that should do it for this video. I'll see you guys in my next video.